That's the meaning of life. Your strength, your work, the material the earth offers, you and what you make of it.
That's the meaning of life. Your work, what you're confronted with in the world and what you do with it. You can be a kind of your own guru, but that doesn't mean you have to do it alone. What better way to start the morning than with one of the easiest questions to wrestle with, right? Well, and at least get your mind juices going. The meaning of life is one of those perennial philosophical questions that a lot of people wonder about and nagging the back of their minds. Some people, they worry about it at the forefront of their minds much more than other people do. However, way you come about wondering about the meaning of life, something that I've noticed and that something that Professor Hicks posted on Facebook this morning reminded me that I think because this issue matters to so many people and because it is so difficult, it's the reason why it has become the object of humor. Cartoons, comedy. How many of you recognize what 42's significance is?
Yeah, the meaning of life.
The meaning of life from what movie?
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yes, well, originally a novel, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So if you haven't read the novel or seen the movie, 42 is supposed to be the answer to the life, universe, and everything. And it's meant to poke a little bit of fun at the search for the meaning of life. What is it, like the answer to a mathematical equation? So that's one way to poke fun at it. The middle one, Monty Python troupe, has the movie The Meaning of Life. And if you can't see it easily, down here, these are little goldfish with the faces of the actors. And in one of a scene that recurs throughout the film, they're swimming around in the fishbowl with the superimposed actor faces, wondering, is this all that there is to life, swimming around in a goldfish bowl? Who am I? What am I? Should I jump out of the goldfish bowl? Like the first image we saw from Professor Salzman's presentation, wondering about the meaning of life. And it's a series of vignettes. You have no idea what one has to do with the other. I won't give away the end of the film. But we see here these other cartoons, even in Peanuts. We have Snoopy sitting on top of his doghouse wondering about the meaning of life. And of course, the classic, travel up to the guru. This one is rather amusing. Have you tried Googling it? How many of you have tried Googling the meaning of life? Okay, all right, at least one person. Okay, it's legit. I mean, you Google everything else, right? Why not the meaning of life? You go up to the guru and this guy's got no idea. He's like, look, see, that's kind of a toughie. So he's prompted to wonder about it too. The cartoon that I saw this morning that Professor Hicks shared, if you're on Facebook, you can take a look at his feed, is here. Come on. There we go. It's the one on the left. Ed was beginning to be irritated by his new, the road less traveled global positioning system. With that turn, you've once again opted for a shallow, conventional, and ultimately unfulfilling life. Don't make the left turn, turn right. And then, wait a sec, we've got a businessman driving there with his road less traveled global positioning system. We've got another businessman who is helicoptered into the guru. He didn't make the climb by himself, by the way. Well, he helicoptered in and he's only got a half an hour. He's like, chop, chop, I got an important meeting in a half an hour. But what's the meaning of life? What are some things you notice about what these cartoons have in common? Bodhi.
They kind of suggest that living life, you kind of, or like associating business with your life is kind of antithetical to finding the meaning of life.
Ah, okay. In both of these are businessmen. And going back, we've got another businessman right, indicated by the tie and white collar, right? The white collar work. Businessman is antithetical to meaning. So these are people who clearly are older, right? They're not young people. maybe they're having a midlife crisis, or somebody's like, businessman, what does that have to do with the meaning of life? And like, oh my gosh, is my life meaningful? So, I mean, this goes to a lot of the themes that Professor Salzman's been exploring with us all week. You know, that business is antithetical to meaning in life. And part of what's very thought-provoking about Rand's work on transforming business and life is like, wait a second, maybe we've been making some assumptions here, and it comes up in our humor. We can see it visibly here. It comes up on our humor that there's a massive assumption, and these are in the context of American culture. I don't know how different the humor is in some other cultures. I'm not an expert in cross-cultural humor. I just know that in the American context, this is quite striking to see. Do you see any other patterns that emerge between this slide and this, and let's go back, and this slide? Richard.
All of them kind of suggest that there is no answer.
There is no answer?
They kind of suggest that there's no answer, it's probably not worth asking. We think about it, but it's an elusive. There's no answer.
Okay, or
Not even from smart gurus or...
okay, that in almost all, well, except for there's a tongue-in-cheek answer, 42. Right, but in all the other cases, we actually don't see anybody giving an answer. Is it an unanswerable question? Stephen raised his hand, and then Bill.
I was just going to piggyback on that. A common theme in the guruing version is that the guru defers the answer or deflects the answer or gives a non-answer, suggesting that even people who have dedicated themselves to the issue haven't got it figured out.
Okay, so yeah, we don't see gurus dropping knowledge, so maybe they don't have it figured out either.
And the genius of Douglas Adams is that with that, we know the answer is 42, but nobody remembers what the question was.
Yes. Yeah, so thank you for bringing some of the context for those who don't know Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There's a context there about...
Still something they don't know.
And now they have to search for the question. Exactly. Any other patterns?
Maybe that people are looking for it through someone else.
People are looking for the answer through somebody else. And I think the guru motif that recurs, I mean, because when I Googled meaning of life in cartoons after I saw Stevens this morning, I had a field day. I almost missed breakfast because I was having so much fun looking through them and trying to find an illustrative collection of them that represented the thousands that I saw. At least 50% of them were people going to gurus. They're looking for the answer through somebody else. They think somebody else has the answer. Well, I'm going to turn the tables a little bit here. And I learned my lesson after the first couple of days of presentations that I had left a writing till the end. I'm going to do it right now. Oh, wait, but not quite yet. Before I have you do a writing for 2 minutes, I know I've been very humorous with this, and I think this is people's typical way of handling serious matters that are very difficult to process. And so I want to turn it back to the serious side of the search for meaning. There's a very famous book from 1946. It was published by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. He's a Holocaust survivor. He was trained as a psychologist before he was rounded up and put into a concentration camp. One of the things that sustained him was he wrote a book in his mind that kept him going. He's like, if I live through this experience of the concentration camps, I want to help other people figure out how to endure life's most challenging circumstances. And he developed a theory of psychology known as logotherapy. How many of you have read Man's Search for Meaning? 1, 2, 3. Oh, 4. Okay, a couple. This is an incredible, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. It's a very powerful book. And in the introduction, you can see at the bottom here, 12 million copies sold on like the 3rd or 4th reissue. Viktor Frankl had his original, his 2nd edition preface where it had sold a few 100,000 copies within like a year or two of its being published. He was shocked. An interviewer, he said, asked him, what do you think accounts for the success of this very depressing book? And he said, if hundreds of thousands of people reach out for a book whose very title promises to deal with the question of a meaning to life, it must be a question that burns under their fingernails. This question matters to us. So people reaching out to learn about the meaning of life from a Holocaust survivor, this question is a big deal. And this is why, actually, the very first course I ever taught 30 years ago, exactly 30 years ago, June 1994, my first independent course, they cut me loose from being a teaching assistant. Like, go ahead. You seem to be okay with this stuff. Go out and do it yourself. I was like, okay. My first course was The Philosophy of Life, Death, and Dying. I have loved teaching this course for 30 years and working through these issues with people. So this is a very tip of the iceberg presentation of material, and particularly from Rand's perspective. We're going to get to how does Rand grapple with this issue in just a little bit. But it's much wider and deeper than that. So many people tried to wrestle with it. And I'd like you to take 2 minutes right now to try to wrestle with it. I didn't put the question on here because we already know what the question is. What first comes to your mind if I were to ask you, what is the meaning of life? So if you have a writing implement, or if you have something in mind, you don't need to write it down. I'm serious. Even if it's 1 or 2 words, what do you associate? What comes, if you're going to just like shake some words out of your mind? Maybe it'll take the form of a sentence or 2. If you were to try to start brainstorming what you think the meaning of life is, what comes to your mind? The dreaded pencils down. That guru thought he had it tough. He had 30 minutes. You have 2. I like to challenge people. Who'd like to share what immediately came to your mind when you were wondering about the meaning of life? Gabrielle.
They put the meaning of life in biology.
Okay, biology?
Biologically?
Meaning of life biologically.
Yeah. I was about to philosophically choose, but the time was up.
That's okay. No. This is what first came to your mind. You're thinking biologically.
And I put to bar, to grow, to reproduce, and to die.
Okay. Born, grow, reproduce, and die. There actually, one of the cartoons I came across, that actually was what they had depicted as the meaning of life. So.
Yes.
Okay, who else? Anything different? Bill.
Add value.
Because I can see it.
Okay. Yeah, so these are your responses. Okay. Thelma.
I looked at it from a sense of purpose, so I put down like we must also calculate what with anyone I need confidence.
Sense of purpose. Helping. Right. There are entire industries, service industries, devoted to helping people. That's not an accident. Anything else? Stephen, and then Bodhi.
I immediately went back to the perspective of a child, just starting out on life, and say like explore, play, trial and error.
Interesting. There's actually, I think Moritz Schlick wrote an article in like 1940 something called "The Meaning of Life is Play." So I've seen people give that answer. PhDs in philosophy give that answer. And another one now. Bodhi.
I was thinking to live morally and heroically.
Okay. Live morally and what?
Heroically. Not just kind of living like this minimally moral life where you're conforming, but also to understand morality and kind of strike out for it.
Okay, live morally, not blindly or out of duty? Yeah. Is that, I'm just trying to get clear on your meaning.
No, I think that makes sense.
So it's a purposive pursuit of morality. Okay. And one last one, Richard.
And I have step 4 for
Okay.
learning, achieving, persevering, enjoying. Kind of think about it as that in
Ooh.
is to another.
There's a reason why I'm not surprised, and we'll unearth that in a bit. Okay. I'm so glad I front-loaded the writing. I moved it from the end to the beginning. I was like, no, we need to do it up front so we can actually get to do this really cool writing exercise. I've done writing exercises like this with students, as you heard, for 30 years. And a lot of what people have said so far overlaps with the most common responses. I pulled out all my old notes and notebooks from the decades to look back through all the times I've taught the course, because I would take notes about, what are the students' thoughts, and I saw grading things and all some former student work that they didn't pick up at the ends of semesters. And I was like, what were some of the most common things that they said over the past 30 years? And I did kind of like a word cloud version of it. These are like word cloud collections of my typical student responses over 30 years. Meaning, purpose, value, life. It's individual. It's about the universe. It's cosmic. It's about connection. It's about community. It's related to beauty, love, wisdom, achievement. Power is the meaning of life. This is very Nietzschean. Friendship, peace, God. You have a calling, and it's to achieve serenity. These were the most common responses, and you can hear how it overlaps with what at least some of you were saying, whether it was in a verb form or something much more specific about a kind of pursuit of value through a type of work. There's an answer that is not on here, but it's not incompatible with much of what's on here, and it's not probably something that would leap to the forefront of your mind if you were to ask someone, well, what's the meaning of life? I have combed through Rand's corpus of work, which is pretty substantial. She wrote some pretty big novels and thousands of articles. She never wrote specifically on the meaning of life, so I had to call out, tease out, where does she even use the phrase meaning of life? I found 3 explicit mentions of the meaning of life. They are all in the novel. 2 of them are in the novel, The Fountainhead. One of them is in her introduction to the 25th anniversary edition of The Fountainhead, which is the one I originally read in 1987. This is my original copy with all my margin notes. So where she specifically identifies what I think is really her view of the meaning of life is in this passage where Howard Rourke is talking to Gail Wynand, a friend of his. How Rand would answer the question, I think, is the meaning of life is your work. Who would like to read the quotations on the board here from, who's got a nice voice that projects? Anybody, any take. I'll read it myself if nobody wants to talk. Bill, have a go.
You want me to read it then?
Sure.
Look, Gail. Rourke got up, reached out, tore a thick branch off a tree, held it in both hands. One fist closed at each end. Then, his wrists and knuckles tensed against the resistance. He bent the branch slowly into an arc. Now, I can make up what I want of it. A bow, a spear, a cane, a rail. That's the meaning of life. Your strength, your work, the material the earth offers, you and what you make of it.
I bolded, that's the meaning of life. your work, what you're confronted with in the world and what you do with it. Now, sounds very cryptic. This is the starting point of trying to excavate what on earth she means by the meaning of life is your work. So the balance of time here that we have, 67 minutes, I'm going to do my best to unpack and analyze with you with some guideposts provided by David Kelly in the selection I have for the readings called Choosing Life, where he springboards from what Rand says about the relationship between choice and life, and how he helps like draw out some more elements that are important to figuring out for yourself, so that hopefully you don't have to climb to the top of a mountain and try to seek that guru. You can be kind of your own guru, but that doesn't mean you have to do it alone. So I'm going to see how this worldview, this philosophy offers you some guideposts. So talking about a guidepost or a roadmap, before talking about meaning and giving the content of a view, why do we even need it? It may seem obvious, but to people, because we keep asking the question, clearly there's something there, but we need to understand whether we actually do need to answer it. Is this a meaningful question? The meaning of life. Parts 2 and 3 are bringing into the conversation the kind of guideposts that David Kelly offers us to help figure out, if you're going to think through it for yourself, if it's, the meaning of life is your work, and it takes you working to do the work of figuring that out, having some guideposts are helpful. And I think he provides us 4 important concepts: constraints, choice, achievement, and experience, which is why I'm not surprised, actually, Professor Salzman had 4 verbs that are connected to this. And I want us to take a deeper dive, because we often think of work in terms of job or vocation or career, and that's not an accident. Right? You essentially need to make a living, right, to help bring material values into existence. But when we ask about the meaning of life, it's not just about the material values, which is probably why there's like the businessman juxtaposed with the guru and those spiritual values. Of course, it doesn't mean that businessmen aren't spiritual. We all are, and that's part of the point. But it's part of the work of being human more fundamentally. So we're going to dig out, what is this, the meaning of life is your work, really mean? I think we need to go through these to start figuring out how to answer the question. So with respect to why we need meaning, you see here on the left side, if you have a loss of meaning. Some people, I've talked to a lot of people who said, you know what, I never wondered about the meaning of life. I'm just living my life. I don't have any problem with it. I'm like, that is fantastic. And that I'm actually one of those people, except I'm a philosopher, so I ask why about everything. And I actually didn't think about the meaning of life until I got into philosophy graduate school. And I was like, oh, there's this question. This is really cool. What's this about? And it's become one of my favorite questions to wrestle with, but not because it had felt like one burning under my fingernails. I've known since I was 5 years old, this may sound very bizarre, ever since I started kindergarten, I loved being in school, and the only way to stay in school was to be a teacher. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna be a teacher. I want to be in school for the rest of my life. I love this place. That's what we're doing here together. I'm still doing it since I was 5 years old. So not everybody figures it out and then sticks with it. It takes a lot of pivots for many people. But not everybody is so lucky to land on their feet with something that they love and they just go with it. A lot of people anguish, or if not anguish like this, clearly this guy looks depressed or frustrated. Something's going on here. And why do we need meaning? Because we don't want to be the person on the left. And I don't want to toss out some rhetorical question, which one would you rather be? I think it's pretty obvious. Nobody wants to be this guy. Maybe George Costanza, right? And Seinfeld, who says if he's happy for too long, he starts getting worried. So he'd rather be miserable because he knows it's not going to get worse. And I think that's meant to be funny because it's so bizarre. But to come back to being serious, the guy on the left There's a reason why the mental health industry is a probably if not billion-dollar, trillion-dollar industry. Whether therapy, people seeking all kinds of treatments, counseling, there's a reason, because we don't want to be the guy on the left. We want to be the person on the right. Joyfully embracing every time we wake up, this is my life. We want to be like that. Clearly, we have a sense of a need for it. But where does that need come from? And actually, Gabrielle, I'm not surprised you mentioned the biology part. Oops. Because, and I want to say a little bit about this. I've taught a course on secular spirituality, because a lot of people think you can't be spiritual unless you're religious. And I'm not going to get into that debate here. So I'm like, look, if you have a religious worldview and that's going to be your source of spirituality, I'm not here to tell you not to believe that or not to live accordance with that. A lot of people think it's impossible to live a spiritual life, to pursue the meaning of life without religion. You can't have ethics without religion, meaning, purpose. And a big argument for Rand is she starts out with a secular naturalistic viewpoint, a biological perspective, biocentric is what it could be called. And she makes the case. She's like, look, whatever the negative case is over there, I'm making a positive case. Without religion, you can have spirituality, meaning, and ethics. And this is just a quick recap for those of you who are here earlier in the week. It wasn't just in my previous 2 presentations, but you've heard it pop up in other people's on the human nature, she thinks, sets you up. Right? Life is conditional. That means we die. And we have to choose to take certain actions that, if you want to live, keep you in existence and healthy. And you're also faced with, if you make the wrong ones, you could get sick and die, which is what makes value and value pursuit possible. Bill mentioned adding value. And value pursuit falls right out of this. But how do you get this guide for figuring out how to choose well rather than poorly? Just look to what your nature is. What kind of beings are we? Not all beings have the same requirements, even for biological living, no less spiritual living. Because we have a consciousness that's volitional. We have to choose. Knowledge doesn't come automatically. Right? Even if you Google it, you still have to think about what you just Googled and figure out whether you think it's true or false. So even Google isn't going to help with that. You got a lot of more work to do. Rational, right? We can think, reason, use logic, conceptual. Achieving the knowledge about what the world is and what the natures of things are takes a lot of work as we abstract. And then that will inform us in pursuing our values. So I'm not going to go through that in detail. We've gone through this a few times before. But biological living doesn't mean just surviving. There's a big difference between surviving and thriving. I think Professor Klein had started to ask about this, if not yesterday, then the day before. And he said, oh, we're going to get to that. It's not just having enough calories to stay in existence, to be the guy holding his head. Clearly he was alive. Just like clearly this sunflower is alive, right? It's a stalk. It has some flowers. It's sort of blooming, but it's kind of scraggly, right? If you entered this into a flower contest, yeah, that's a joke, because you ain't going to win no medal. The one on the right is thriving. This is much easier to see in non-human species, the difference between surviving and thriving. Ooh, the one on the right, yeah, it's alive, barely. It's spindly and scraggly, and its little leaves are you want something bursting with life that's thriving. That's the one that's going to, not that it's a contest and, like the contest of life, the one who dies with the most toys wins. That's not what I'm going for here. It has to do with you having a flourishing life. I know that we're not sunflowers, so the metaphor is just meant to illustrate. We can tell, it's easy to see out there when things are just surviving versus thriving. It's not always as easy to see whether we're surviving versus thriving, because there's so much interior to us. So it's only when somebody holds his head or starts talking about, oh my gosh, I don't know if life's worth living, Then we start getting worried when they show their interiority somehow through their actions or words to know, are they thriving or not? And you only know it from the inside. So it's difficult. Like, we're not mind readers. I can't tell whether there's something going on unless you show me somehow. So there's a big difference between surviving and thriving, and it's connected to the meaning of life. On Rand's view, she does have terminology for spirituality. She talks about the human spirit. So what's the difference between spirituality, and being spiritual? So spirit, as we've seen a few times before in her view, is she just means by consciousness, our active faculty of awareness, of learning about the world around us and the world inside of us. It's all part of the same world, but only I have direct access to what's in here, and we all have direct access. And you only have indirect access to what's in here, and I have direct access, and we can all talk about together through conversation what's out here. Spirituality is a subject matter. It's where we talk about and figure out together, well, what is the stuff that matters in human life? And when you talk about mattering to whom and for what purpose? And how do we figure out what matters? So you have to think. You're using your reason. You have to figure out how to value pursue. That's ethics. You have to form your character, because it's going to be you doing the work of figuring it all out and being a certain kind of person. And you have an emotional aspect to your living, and you cannot ignore that. Right? Emotions may not be, in Rand's words, tools of cognition, right? Because people may feel a certain way and say, well, I feel like I can walk out in front of a Mack truck and survive. And you'd be like, yeah, that's a very dangerous feeling, because you're going to be dead real fast. So emotions don't make reality what it is, but it is a fact you have them, and you need to listen to them, because sometimes, as we were having the conversation the other day about gut instinct, right? Sometimes it's a lightning flash way of indicating to us that something is good or bad, and we have to unpack what's behind, what's causing the emotion. And if you're having bad feelings, bad emotions, that you're depressed, it takes a lot of work to figure out what's causing it. Just as it takes a lot of work to figure out what's causing happy emotions. What cause? Because if you can control the causes, imagine being able to introspect and control the causes of happiness. That's where the power lies. And power not in a Machiavellian, Nietzschean sense, but power in terms of your capacities. Empowerment is a good thing, right? So what kinds of philosophical tools are going to help empower you in your search for meaning? That's the subject matter of spirituality. Being spiritual involves acting in accordance with the needs of the human spirit. I can't ignore that. I have to think and learn to figure it out. Reaching for the moral ideal. I can't just sit there and be like, okay, meaning of life nuggets drop into my mind. Well, I got to do something to stretch toward that. Striving to actualize your highest potential. So Professor Salzman he has verbs. And verbs not in the infinitive form, to learn, to achieve, to persevere. Learning, achieving, persevering, enjoying. What's the difference between the infinitive and this? What do you notice about the ing ending? It doesn't stop. It's an activity. If you're a grammar nerd like me, this is called the gerund form. Yeah. Okay, so the gerund form is the ing at the end. It's like ongoing activity and pursuing purposive goals that enrich your life. That takes work. Work is ongoing. The meaning of life is your work. I mentioned that I found three specific, explicit identifications in the Fountainhead. I'm going to show you the next two. And this one's from the introduction. Who'd like to read this one? So I found a passage where she says the meaning of life is your work. She just right out states it. This is talking about meaning a little bit differently. And I think meaning seeking is value seeking, which was Professor Klein's answer to the question. Who'd like to read this out loud? Everybody's afraid to move. It's like an auction. It's going to go to me.
I'll read it.
Okay, Marcia, belt it out.
The best of mankind's youth start out in life with a sense of enormous expectation, the sense that one's life is important, that great achievements are within one's capacity, and that great things lie ahead. They can hold on to the fire that is not to be betrayed, learning how to give it shape, purpose, and reality, and that gives life its meaning.
What do you think about this quotation? What other indication does it give you about meaning here? I find it's an incredibly beautiful passage. And especially addressing the younger people in the audience. I mean, we're all young at heart in this room. Richard.
The things I get out of it is one, the emphasis on the youth is the idea that you have many years ahead of you. So, as opposed to someone who's 75, there's this well, the more you can get of this stuff, the better. But it ends with, and it's your choice. You're definitely volitional. You give it meaning, you shape it, it's not a passive thing that, stuff happens and everything turns out for the best. You have to make it turn out the best possible.
Okay, so two things. One, you've got this, it's focused on youth, like looking ahead at the long journey, the road ahead of you, and with us, and knowing that there's choice involved, and we'll get to choice in just a slide or two. How many of you feel this way about your life? Yes. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. I can see your face. Oh, I love that. I see your face. You're beaming, actually. And a sense of enormous expectation that your life is important. If you look at the meaning of the word meaning, what does it mean? Sorry, I don't want to get into the silly infinite regress. It's just one of those words where you have to explore the meaning of the word meaning. You see, what something means something to you. It means it matters to you. You find it important. It's significant to you. You care about whether, how it goes in the world and how it relates to you. And this is talking about your life. The third passage where I found it is my favorite passage from the Fountainhead. A lot of people call it the boy on the bicycle scene. I don't like to call it that because I don't think it gets to the heart of the matter. I call it the courage to face a lifetime scene. Who wants to read this one? Okay, Gabriel, go for it.
They often hoped he would not have to die. He had just graduated from college and he wanted to decide whether life was worth living. He did not know that this was the question in his way. He did not think of dying. He thought only he did not think of dying. He thought only that he wished to find joy and the reason of and winning in life. He had always wanted to write music, and he could give no other identity to the thing he sought. Show me your achievement, and then knowledge will give me courage for mine, the front ahead.
Thank you for reading it because I always get teary with this scene. Some people call it the boy and the bicycle scene because there's this young man who's riding a bicycle through the hills of Pennsylvania. And as he comes up over a hill and he's wondering these things, he sees in the valley below beautiful set of homes created. He almost thinks he's hallucinating. It's just these organically emerged like little homes nestled in and around the mountainside. And what it is a summer resort called Monadnock Valley. And he notices there's a man sitting on the rock, looking down at it. And he goes over to him and asks him about this. Is this real? And the man is Howard Rourke, the protagonist of this novel. He says, it is now. And Howard Rourke's like, I made that. And the boy just says to him, thank you. And the next sentence is, Howard Rourke he never seen the boy before and he would never see him again. He had no idea that he had just given someone the courage to face a lifetime.
Tim.
One of the things I take away from this is, I told you I get very emotional with this scene, is sometimes you get so wrapped up in what you're pursuing that you forget the effect of your work when you're pursuing what you love, how that can have an impact on other people. And you never know who can be inspired by your example. Stephen, you raised your hand. Sorry, to probably help me from my tears. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a great passage. I think every teacher and parent thinks about their impact with respect to the younger generation. But I'm also just reminded of your earlier cartoons and the guru motif. The guru's never give an answer. Right, so you go seeking the guru. And so here we have the young man, doesn't quite know he's seeking a guru, but he does meet Howard Rourke, who then functions as a guru and provides him with an answer. So it's it doesn't fit with the cartoon where you don't get the answer ever. Here there is an answer.
I have never thought about it this way. Thank you. And it just struck me that Howard Rourke's answer was, when he's pointing to, because Howard Rourke is an architect, he's pointing to the buildings he helped bring into existence. In pointing to his work, right? So the earlier passage was Howard Rourke talking to his friend Gail Wynand about the meaning of your life as your work, the materials that the world gives you and what you choose to do with it. He points to his own work because that's the meaning of life to him. And what we see in this scene is we already see the seeds of what this young man's thinking of doing with his life. He had always wanted to write music. He wants to be a composer of music, a musician, perhaps, of some sort. So Howard Rourke's shown you can achieve. It takes a lot of work, but I did it. You can point to a success, his own success, and that's what gave him courage. So who knows what kind of music this young man is going to create in his life. But he got back on his bicycle, went off to face the rest of his life with that inspirational boost from Howard Rourke's example, and may become, I don't know, Richard Haley in, I was actually, that's in from Atlas Shrugged, there's a recurring minor character, Richard Haley, who's a composer. We never know the name of the boy on the bicycle. All we know is he wanted to write music. So maybe he's the character that showed up in one of Rand's future novels. So fascinating connection. Richard.
I just noticed that there's a difference between striving and surviving in here as well. You wanted to decide whether life was worth living. That could have been worded as you wanted to know what to do with his life. The worth living is, like, I'm not just surviving here. I want to know if this is going to be worth it. And if that's true, I really need to be thinking about thriving, not just surviving.
Yeah,
That's there's subtle words in here that suggest something bigger than just getting by.
exactly. Exactly. What should I do with my life? And that's not that it's not an unimportant question, because a lot of people ask the question, what should I do? I'm interested in learning these subjects. What could I do with it? Those are absolutely legitimate questions. Believe me, as a philosophy major, you get asked that all the time. What can you do with a philosophy degree except teach? I was like, let's see, live a great life. That seemed to be more fundamental, but yeah, teach, and among other things. I don't think Stephen would dispute me at all on this, but I see, and maybe he's one very well placed because of how much work he's done in the field of epistemology on the theory of knowledge. But I think in a way philosophy is applied epistemology. you can take philosophical ways of thinking about the world, philosophy of social science, philosophy of biology, philosophy of music, philosophy of mathematics, and apply it in any field of study. Right? Professor Klein pursues business ethics, right? So you bring to bear philosophy to a business context, right? So to me, philosophy is the most practical thing in the universe because you can apply it to anything you do in life. So I'm used to getting the question, what could you do with that? And I had to learn to develop an answer that I thought was true and that could actually land with people. Because when I put it that way, they're like, oh, wow, that does sound very practical. It's like, yeah, you make thousands of choices a day. I want to choose what's true and good. It takes a lot of thought. Study philosophy, you got to think a lot. It's not the only field where you can do that, but to me, it was the one I was attracted to. Now it's time to bring in some David Kelly. This has all been beautiful and aspirational. And to me, that's kind of like the bedrock of where to start with like thinking through this. But now we need some more guideposts. Like, okay, I've got a direction to go into. How do I move forward from here? And I think David Kelly gives us some really wonderful concepts to build on this. He's like, okay, Rand's got this philosophy for living life on Earth. But how do you go about figuring that out? First, he gives us the two tools that go together, constraints and choice. You have options, but it's not anything goes. So what is this about? We have to start with constraints. Constraints, why? There are constraints on how you pursue value, and that's set by the reality, the natures of things, how things function in the world. We've already talked about the constraints of human nature, right? Humans are not dogs, are not trees, are not squirrels, are not sunflowers. So there's certain restrictions on value pursuit that, I think earlier in the week, was it, Bill, you said, you want to make sure you don't drink arsenic or cyanide, whatever it was. Yeah, if you want to live, don't do that, right? But it's not that, not all things are poisonous for all beings, right? There are some things that certain living beings can ingest that others cannot. Well, you got to know what kind of living being you are. So that's a place to start. The natures of things is your reality of your nature, but the natures of everything else in the world. And those are going to provide objective limits, hard limits, on what's going to be choice-worthy for you to survive, no less thrive. This is a bizarre thing. Don't do this at home. In my trying to figure out on I don't know, how many of you have heard of the Darwin Awards? Okay, you're laughing. So what are the Darwin Awards? The Darwin Awards. Charles Darwin.
Someone does something so...
Yeah, so step and then die.
Exactly. Yeah, so exactly. So he didn't go. He was born and he grew. He didn't live long enough to reproduce before dying, because he did something that was so ridiculous. Like, it was obviously not a good thing to do. In this case, it was not a matter of doing something that caused you to die. This was a real phenomenon. I thought was kind of scary. This is actually like a still from a TikTok video called the Coil Challenge. It's bizarre. I don't have a TikTok account. I came across it when I was doing a search on YouTube, and these videos popped up about Darwin Awards and like doing stupid things that could kill you. And these are macho guys who record themselves putting their arm on hot coils and then showing the scars. I was like, oh my goodness. Okay, so don't do this at home, really. I know you're grimacing. So I was too when I realized this was real. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not staged, it was real stuff. So this guy was really putting his arm on a hot coil, knowing what it's gonna do to him. I'm like, okay, dude, you want the Darwin Award? That's your business.
Yeah, there's an aspect to it that's very sad.
The real award should go to those with no facial expression.
Okay, well, you try to I'm not gonna say, if you were to try to put your arm on a hot coil and not grimace while you were doing it, I'm not sure if that's humanly possible. But Marcia.
There's an aspect to it that's very sad, which is that they're not getting the kind of, they're not figuring out something to do that's actually productive in life and thriving to make themselves feel good about themselves. So they have to do this instead to show how macho they are.
Okay, two dudes here, hands up. I don't know who first, Steve and then Bill.
The history of philosophy guy, cheer. And what do we then say about Stoicism? And this says, like, training for a Stoic conception of being a man. Life is about pain and enduring pain and demonstrating to the tribe and society that you can endure pain. One example, right, and or religious martyrs for whom one's whole quest at the meaning is to seek out opportunities for which one will suffer for one's cause.
Yeah.
That is the meaning of your life.
Yeah.
Just that we're, yeah, the way you frame it, I think, is the right way, but there already we're inside one philosophical university. And
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm glad you brought that up. Before I go to Bill raise his hand, I want to say a little bit about that because I am presenting this view of a view of an answer to the meaning of life, because this week is about learning about Ayn Rand's philosophy. How does that apply to business and life? How can you transform the business context and your life, which are interrelated, using this philosophy? So that's why I'm emphasizing this. And I'm not ignoring. I already did a hat tip to, like, there are religious approaches to the topic. And Stoicism and asceticism and various religious traditions do have different views about this. Clearly, when Rand's argument is that human nature is the standard by which you evaluate whether your choices are going to, in pursuing your values, promote human life. The purpose is happiness. In a lot of these other traditions, not necessarily. Stoicism depends on which Stoic you're studying. But generally, the aim of some of them, the ultimate good, is apatheia. And saying apathy means, I don't care, but apatheia means to have like an emotionally neutral state so that you don't get flummoxed by anything. And you're to stoically bear up to the vicissitudes of life. So don't get too excited about the good stuff that's happening, because you really can't have that much control over it. And don't get too down about bad stuff that happens. So, your spouse died, unfortunate. Don't have control over that. Don't get too attached. No, to not be attached is to minimize your opportunity to suffer too much. But it also minimizes your opportunity to have too much joy. And so there's a cost to that approach. And some people gravitate towards Stoicism because they want the apatheia state. And part of that has to do with what do you have control over, what don't you have control over. And if you don't have much control over anything other than the state of your own mind, and this is the Stoic argument, right? And then there are religious arguments. The more you suffer, the more you demonstrate to God your commitment to living by God's law. And you will it's a vale of tears now, but you'll be rewarded later after you die. Well, clearly, since Rand is secular, right, she rejects that kind of approach of the meaning of life is suffering. She rejects the approach that the meaning of life is apatheia, or she's embracing happiness. And so, right, there's a lot of work to do to persuade someone that, well, this is the worldview to go with, and if you are persuaded by this, then we're trying to flesh out on this account what is the meaning of life, and like what does that mean specifically in the context of the meaning of life is your work. So I'm like trying to unfold that, but I'm very glad you brought in, like, there's a lot of other worldviews out there that have different answers to the question. And this, what he's doing doesn't fit in with this worldview, but it may very well fit in with others. So thank you for bringing that up. Bill, and then we'll...
No, I was going to say that, just sort of in isolation or with no reason behind it, of course, that's just idiotic. But one of my favorite television shows from the 70s, which probably nobody here watched, but was a show called Kung Fu.
Yeah, I love Kung Fu.
About the Shaolin priest, was his name Kane?
Yes.
And at the end of their trials, if you, your last trial to become a Shaolin priest was to lift this pot of hot coals and move it to another post that then opened the door and you left the monastery, but you had to lift it with your arms.
Yes.
And it had red hot, a dragon on one side and a tattoo on the other. So you're basically giving yourself, you were giving yourself the mark of the priest.
Yeah.
And might not be the thing I want to do, but in that context, it had this sort of, it's a final trial that you have to do.
Yeah.
And then an art that requires an immense amount of toleration for pain and physical. And in that context, it makes sense. Not that we're going to run around doing it.
Yeah.
That doesn't. But we can't confuse arms being burned with making no sense. It's arms being burned in a TikTok on a stove that makes no sense. And in another way, it could.
Yeah, no, and I get that, like, especially as the tests and trials, and this is not to, achieving any kind of value, even if it's not a value you embrace or recognize as valuable for promoting the life you want to live, unless you're just going to be a couch potato, like on the first day, that guy Peter from Office Space, who's like, yeah, I hate Mondays because I hate the work, and he said, if I had $1 million, I would literally do nothing. Just like that, like if you're literally doing nothing, and that's when I said that's the Bartleby the Scrivener case, you're going to end up dying, like just expiring, because you're not doing you're not acting in the world to maintain yourself. You'll just, entropy kicks in, whoosh, there you go. So you will die fairly quickly, within days or weeks. So all of these take work. Right? Some of them involve physical suffering, some of them involve psychological suffering, emotional suffering. Work, I don't want to say work is suffering, because I don't. It's challenging. Right? So you'll notice that there's almost nothing about suffering. It's not that you won't suffer and face obstacles. Right? If my sweetheart were to die, I would be anguished. You notice how long, right? Grief work is the work of a lifetime. Never goes away. C.S. Lewis has a beautiful passage in his book, A Grief Observed, when his wife died of cancer. A phrase that I read 30 years ago and has always stuck with me: her absence is like the sky spread over everything. So the loss is always with you. How you integrate it into living the rest of your life. As he said, his wife's name was Joy, would have wanted me to live the rest of my life with joy in more ways than one. And he wasn't going to give up on it because of that kind of suffering, but he learned to reweave his life together and to live and to flourish in the way that he understood. So it's not that you won't face it, but on this view, the purpose of life is happiness. And if that's the part of the purpose, and how does that manifest in you pursuing it meaningfully for you, that takes work. Which there's lots of obstacles, heartbreak, frustration, right? It's a different type of, I wouldn't call it suffering, but all the other stuff to go through. Did you have a hand up, Stephen?
Yes, a bit of a mood shift, fashion and humor
Okay.
after that serious thing. But it reminded me of a joke from a female comedian a couple of years ago. She was unmarried, but she said when she does get married, she's going to marry a man who has a lot of scars and tattoos, because then she knows he has a high pain tolerance.
Yeah. That, I have to admit, I do have a little bit of a macho streak, and I'm like, yeah, you know how much weight I can lift? And sometimes people are like, why do you care? It's like, yeah, because I can do it. And it's no pain, no gain. I mean, part of it's just like physical fitness, because I would like to live a long life in a healthy condition, and that takes work. Right? And so, and you have to build up a certain amount of pain tolerance to do that. So stretching yourself, feeling the aches and pains, lifting a new set of weights, running a little bit farther, right? Rodrigo is running. And when you took up running, you had to shift your life choices to accommodate being more successful at that. Right? I won't get into it because I didn't mean to pick on you, but there was a good example of, it's not easy to do difficult things in all its dimensions: physical, biological, emotional, intellectual. Bodhi.
Not to defend the future Darwin Award recipient, but so like we can imagine where it's like this isn't just a one-off thing he did where it was stupid. It's like maybe he's building a following, trying to get paid, get TikTok famous.
Okay.
If we're like going on Rand's framework, do we then have to think his work here is like noble, or can we make a judgment of no, this work is stupid and self-destructive?
Oh, well, no, that's an excellent question. Does anybody in here who knows Rand's work well have thoughts about that before I put in my 2 cents? Bill. So,
Values he
Well, entertainment value, perhaps?
When he's generating easy money, everyone like we could get just some views and TikTok would pay.
yeah. So if this is drawn clearly, because they monetize this stuff, if he's getting, so he could have doing this as a stunt to like build a following and generate. I like the way you put it, easy money. Like, in one sense, it looks like it's not easy because like I'm not putting my arm on the hot coils. You can't pay me enough. But in another sense, so it doesn't look easy. But in another sense, it's and this is where the judgment comes in. And Rand has a phrase she uses, stand up, judge, and be ready to be judged. That there are objective constraints, but within that there's a lot of choice, and we have to get to the choice part. So you're actually asking about the role of choice. So there are constraints. Yes, if you want to put your arm on the hot coil, this is what's going to happen. It's going to scar you. You're going to feel this amount. You're going to feel pain. It's going to scar you, and then there are consequences. So there's a difference between perhaps making easy money. What would it take to pay you to do such and such? And there are some things like, you can never pay me money to do certain things. I draw my line in a certain way, and I'm very judgmental in many ways, and I certainly apply it to myself. Like, I'm drawing the line here, because if I cross that, I can't look myself in the mirror. Easy money is not easy. It may be easy in the moment. It's not easy in the lifetime. Can you live with that?
$1 million? Can we get it?
I'm curious about
No.
Maybe you want me
Yeah.
I'm curious about how it's entertaining people. Like, what is it giving people?
I'm sorry. I think I fell right into it. Clearly, we've been talking about this dude's coil challenge for 10 minutes now. And to a certain extent, it was a little entertaining. I did the Darwin Awards bit, and I'm not saying I was amused by it. I found it cringeworthy, but it was worth talking about. I just made use of it, and it's somewhat entertaining. But to actually be the passive recipient of, let me see how much pain people can put themselves in, and like, I don't search for this stuff. I only came across it because I was looking for examples of people doing things that I thought were extremely harmful to themselves, where you could very quickly see the consequences of your choices in terms of the physical effects, like the hard constraints of reality. You may not want the coil to be painful and burn you, but if you had any doubts about it, go ahead and do it. If some people, you gotta live it, the life of hard knocks, and find out for yourself what the consequences are.
What I was asking is, they were bringing up the justification that
Yes.
was entertaining people
Yes.
and making money from it. And so there's always the choice you have to make. What are you going to do to make your money?
Yes.
Right? What's of value to make your money? So how is that entertaining people? And then ask yourself, is that something that you think is a good value? So I guess I'm asking you guys what you think. How is he entertaining people by doing that?
Just doing something that can like attract more audience. Because if you're doing the normal stuff, everybody knows what they're doing. But he's doing something that generally not everyone would be doing, and could attract more audience out of what he.
And
Something destructive, though. So people like to see things that are destructive, right?
I mean,
The gladiators were very entertaining.
Yeah.
why do we watch like those horror films where everything that happens is just torture and we know everyone's going to die? Like, it's the same.
Yeah. But in that, those are the difference between fiction and reality. This guy's really doing it. It's not an actor simulation. I mean, the horror ones, like, I would not watch literal torture. That is a moral issue. Like, if somebody's inflicting it on somebody, I'm going to bust in with guns blazing to stop that. That's rights violating. That's a big difference. Like, line drawing. I am not going to torture people for money. Okay, so I'm talking hard lines here. You can't pay me to do that. I don't even want to be paid to simulate doing that as an actor. But this guy's really doing it. And I want to say, it's stupid short of deadly. I can't watch somebody do something that he actually dies on screen from doing the stupid thing. But there's a movie with a lot of vignettes, and I have to admit, because I'm sometimes a 14-year-old boy in some ways, and this is where my dude-like qualities emerge. There's a movie called Jackass. How many of you have seen the show or the movie Jackass? All right, yes, I'm admitting it on camera. And I have laughed because these guys are doing stupid things and they end up like, you may or may not want to watch some of the episodes. I'm just going to say that it's your choice, of course. But they're doing stupid stuff. I laugh. Like, at least he didn't, I can't believe he survived that, but that was kind of funny. And it's stupid, but because they did kind of sort of harm themselves a little bit. I wouldn't advise doing it, and I wouldn't do it myself. And yet, it's providing entertainment value. These guys made a lot of money, millions of dollars from it. And maybe I shouldn't be. Maybe if you think I'm complicit in being a laughing audience member, I shouldn't be doing that. Maybe I need to not encourage. There's some things I won't encourage because I think they're damaging in some ways. I don't find them funny. But we're actually going to talk about humor tonight. So I actually want to shift to some other slides. One last question, though. Rodrigo.
Maybe it's just an intervention. Maybe I want to rephrase not a movie, but why do we watch UFC? Because that's harming to real people that voluntarily.
Yes. Yeah, no, the ethics of boxing and wrestling. I mean, these are, and so there's dangerous sports. I mean, football, right? There were some movies made about the concussions. Like, there's a doctor I can't remember the name of the film, but I think Will Smith was the doctor in it. Very good movie. And about, people were worried, should we ban the sport of football, right? Because of the concussions that were being suffered. And so the
purpose in sports is not to hurt yourself. The purpose here is to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
To hurt others, and you will get hurt. Like when you're boxing, you will.
Yeah. And
But I guess I frame it more, what is the ultimate purpose?
And here, this is where I'm going to bring in the role of choice. So the first thing was meant to show there are hard constraints. You put your arm on the coil, you're going to get burned and feel pain. We're having this we could debate for hours about this, but I need to move the conversation along a little bit. But we're already talking about what I think Bodhi originally put on the table, judging, evaluating. And I'm evaluating all the time for myself. And I think Bill said, we're always making evaluations about other people. It's not necessarily a bad thing as long as we try to be as objective as possible about it. And you're asking, what value is that serving? Is it a legitimate value? Is it really going to promote not just survival, but thriving of people's lives? But this is where the element of choice comes in, right? So there are hard constraints, and there are maybe fuzzier constraints depending on the unknowns about how certain things affect certain people. Like, for example, I can eat different kinds of nuts, peanuts, walnuts. My sister is deathly allergic to nuts. She can't eat them, right? So there's variety there, like different things affect different people differently. However, within these constraints, which is where all the stuff on value theory and ethics, not all of it, there's meta-ethics, but within the constraint, it's fought about. When you're pursuing value in your life, what role does choice have in it? Choice for you to live your life without other people coming along to block you from it, right? So when we have debates about public policy, and some of you work in public policy, some of you want to go into law and politics, or are a policy analyst. Government interference. Should people be stepping in to tell you, you can't be on the show Jackass. You can't put put your arms on hot coils. You can't ride a car without a seatbelt. You can't ride a bicycle without a helmet. You can't drink 2 liters of Diet Coke. We're going to cap the size that can be produced, especially on sugar drinks. New York City, they tried to have like ban large quantities of sugary soda at 7-Eleven, and they couldn't sell them in cups of 32 ounces. It's like, really, people aren't going to like them buy 3 10-ounce cups and get around it. There's always people looking to ban and control and regulate. And then, of course, when people are like, don't you tell me how to live my life, there's going to be pushback. But just because you may push back on government banning, controlling, regulating, capping, etc., it doesn't mean we can't all talk about and try to persuade one another and figure out for ourselves what are the parameters of it. It's my life, yes. If I'm internalizing the costs, let me experiment. But that doesn't mean, like with friends, they might be like, you know what, I'm a little concerned about you doing the coil challenge. I know you monetized it and you're bringing in the bucks, but is that the best way of making a living? I'm worried about you, man. Right? So friends will do that to one another. They'll talk through the problem of figuring out how to make a living. The choice to live is fundamental. Like, if you don't choose to live, it's over. Your Bart will be laying on the couch. But if you've chosen to live, that puts ethics on the table. Figure out what standard, how to evaluate, when to judge, what level to bring judgment in, whether or not to bring in controls. Like when I said before, I would come in with guns blazing if I saw somebody gratuitously torturing an innocent person. I'm not kidding. That's, to me, what I think one of the justifications for the government is. I don't want to turn this into a political philosophy, but you can see how this is connected. Right? The meaning of life cannot be to torture people and inflict gratuitous suffering on them and violating people's individual rights. I draw a line there. And that's, but there's a lot of flexibility for having discourse about other things. So the choices we make, though, are not going to be, shouldn't be arbitrary. Like, and people ask you, why did you do that? I don't know, I just did it. I felt like it. Like, that's not a very satisfying reason, but they're also not mandatory. It's not like there was some like, oh, I pursued this activity because it just like fell out of the universe and into like, oh, this is the thing to do. Like, why? That doesn't have a why either. It's nothing's obvious. It's, on Rand's view, it's relationally, objectively valuable for me by my judgment in the context of my life. This is what we're having the arguments about the coil challenge in the context of my life, which is different from the context of your life. Right? Some people, like, I've had people say, you know what, you're not really raking in the millions doing that philosophy gig. I was like, yeah, and your point is what? It's not that I'm against making millions or billions of dollars. Man, if you produce value in those ways, making money on that scale, all the more power to you if you do it in a good way and not doing it, by hurting people and taking their stuff. Go for it. But I'm doing this thing and people are only willing to pay a certain amount for it. And I love what I do. Nobody can take that away from me. That's my work. And if I don't make that much money, but it's enough to live on, I'm cool with that, right? So there are these trade-offs in the context of my life. So if you wag your finger at me and say, you're not a millionaire, it's like, yeah, so what? It's my life. That's what makes it meaningful, though. I chose it. I made the commitment to it. I think so, there's something that, I forget which day Professor Klein said it. He said, I was just about to make that choice, and then you told me I have to do it. Don't you hate when people tell you to do something you were just about to do? Then it's not clear, like, from the outside, why you did that thing.
And then you feel like you did that because somebody said you to.
Exactly. And they just took all the fun out of it. They sucked the fun out of it. Because this is the role of commitment. When you commit to doing something, that you chose it, I chose it, it came from me, it's an expression of yourself. That's what makes it meaningful. If somebody else tells you to do it and you're like, oh, my God, do it. Actually, Bodhi, when you said earlier about living morally, not like because somebody like told you or put it on you, but like really wrestling with figuring it out. Like, that's a way of talking about autonomy matters to you. It's on your terms. You've committed to the endeavor. It's not from this external thing somebody put on you. And there's all this optionality. Like, everybody needs to do some kind of work to materially produce stuff and spiritually produce stuff. But within it, right, who you're friends with, what work you do, short of certain things like being a torturer, that kind of stuff, is up to you. Stephen?
Yeah, I'm just thinking the flip side of this choice thing in connection with a lot of business ethics. If you think of the stereotypical bureaucratic or administrative person who's an obstacle record and makes you do it, so you go in and you're trying to get something done. They say, we can't do it, we can't do that, right? Or the flip side of that, you have to do it this way, and you complain about it, and often their policy will be, I don't make the rules around here.
Yes. Ah.
So
Yeah.
this is not my choice, so they're assuring any kind of responsibility.
Absolutely. And actually, there's a point I didn't get to address on the previous slide. Don't confuse the metaphysical with the man-made. Is from, Rand wrote an article called The Metaphysical versus the Man-Made. And I actually didn't speak about what's this doing on here. Right? This would have been the sign. The government comes in and says, bans you from putting your hand on the hot stove. And that's the, like, I don't make the rules around here. But guess what? How do rules come into existence? How do rules come into existence? This is not rhetorical. People in politics and law, looking at you guys.
Okay.
Somebody writes them. Right? The rules didn't, like the Monty Python and the Meaning of Life screen, right? It's supposed to, the stone tablet or like the commandments that come down, right, on the mountain, the 10 Commandments of God. The rules didn't fall out of the sky. We made the rules. It's like the rules of monopoly. There are revolutions, people write constitutions, statute law. Humans come up with rules, and they could be good or bad rules, and what are those grounded in? Those are separate big questions. But Stephen reminded me, like, when the guy comes in and is like, you know, I'm just here to make sure the rules are followed. I didn't make them up. That's bad faith. Somebody made them up. And they can be changed. And I'm pushing back on them because these rules are garbage. They're constraining the business. I want this business to succeed, and you're putting rules on me that are not working. I care about this business more than you do. Let's talk. So who do I talk to about these rules? Where'd they come from? Because they're man-made. It's not metaphysical like the coils. Right? The coils have properties. You heat them up, you go, ah! That's metaphysical. Man-made, like seeing that sign, that's not going to make it the case that coils do or don't burn me. So I'm glad you brought that up because it reminded me I neglected to talk about that difference and what the sign meant.
I'm curious to see what you think about this too, but in Rand's view, I think you have to be careful about that and pursue this question along certain means. For her, money, and I know this sounds kind of, money's got a value. For her, that special, whatever the joy is, that in and of itself is not a value. It's what the joy reflects or the money reflects. And she's very clear, if you get a lot of money and you don't have a virtue to live up to it or to destroy you. So if I'm saving a lot of money, then snort a lot of coke, and the money had no value. In the whole context thing is zero. And I keep remembering with the coil thing, I might be Dagny walking past the theater, two heads on a pillow, answering the classic question, should a woman tell? Right? It's a bad movie. And she's merciless on it. It has no value. I don't care if people pay for it. I don't care if people make money for it. It's not a creative expression of the best one has to offer.
Yes.
And so, no, he could make all the money he wants. It could be with all the private choices he wants. it actually does create it creates this glow and it creates money, but it really does create no value in the world. It is worthless.
And the thing is, this is why, defenders of the free markets is like, yeah, we're defending the right of markets to have creative minds and energies unleashed to create the best of themselves. But when you allow that, you also allow people to create the worst of themselves. And in any domain of entertainment, books, philosophies, I don't know, you actually have to empirically do this. I'm going to say a bold claim. Most of it's garbage. Most movies are bad movies. Most novels are bad novels. People do a lot of crappy work. Like they do the work sort of poorly. It's just not a great product. So it's true, right? People can make, but the thing is, you leave people free to make subpar stuff. But the thing is, as a producer of that stuff and as a consumer of that stuff, you have to judge for yourself how much value is it adding to your life as a producer and as a consumer. And are you going to be the guy holding his head, depressed and anguished, like, is this really all there is to life? Two heads on a pillow deciding the question of should she tell, or whatever that ridiculous title was? Or is the meaning of life the Coil challenge? I don't know who this guy's friends are, but I'd be interested in talking to them and saying, what are you observing about how is this guy happy? If you ask him, are you happy? Do you feel like this is worthwhile? Do you wake up? I mean, maybe he woke up that day and he's like, oh, what thing can I do to monetize and catch people's attention? But afterward, and he's like, comes down from the making the money from it, is he happy with that choice? Right? From the inside, you're going to know whether you've done something that's worth living or not. Which brings us to achievement and experience that David Kelly brings in, 2 other concepts. We've been focusing a lot on the achievement side, but the experience cannot be neglected to answer these questions. So we're pretty clear on the achievement side. Achieving stuff. Yes, I got the job. Now I'm going to go ahead with the work. It's future-oriented. Your focus is outward. Value pursuit, like I want to be friends with that person. That person looks really cool. This work looks interesting. You go ahead with the work to do it. Doing the work is necessary for a living, but effort and hard work are not sufficient for living. It's like when you put in the effort for writing a paper, it's not sufficient for earning a good grade because there's more to it. You actually have to bring values into existence. Right? And this is the economic point that Professor Salzman's been making all week. Right? Production of value precedes the consumption of value. You have to bring values into the world in order to consume them, whether they're material values or spiritual values. They need to be brought into existence for you to achieve them. A lot of people are like, okay, achieve, let's go get the values. As a recovering workaholic, I can tell you, stop to smell the roses. Because on the other side of it, I think an important point that David Kelly brings out is that you need to achieve values. So many people are focused on achieving values and focusing is primarily on the material aspect. Get the money, put the food on the table. And that's important, but that's not the most important thing. You need to experience your values for many reasons. One of the reasons we're talking about is now that you've made the choices, are you happy with them? Do you find them worthwhile, what you've done, what you've created? If you ignore your psychological need to pause and celebrate the achievement, you can cause burnout and loss of meaning. And every once in a while, I got the signs of, wow, I'm totally exhausted, which takes us to Professor Salzman's question of me earlier in the week. That's not incompatible with leisure, properly understood. My view about leisure is that the purpose of it is to rejuvenate you. Rand calls it spiritual fuel, to fuel your life. So the spiritual aspect of you, your experience of the world, right? There's a learning and value pursuit side. There's the experience of the world to be like, yes, I made that, like Howard Rourke looking at his the houses he helped bring into existence. Or to be the woman here who wrote a book, right? You're working. Are you happy working? And then you celebrate your achievement, or you're just going to keep working endlessly and burn out? That satisfaction, taking the time to experience the joy, or to experience like, why am I not feeling joy? Maybe that wasn't the thing to be pursuing. That's important. It's a learning moment. You need the feedback from the pause to reflect and sort it all out. Was it worthwhile? No. Okay, let me do something different. No more coil challenge for me. Was it worthwhile? Yes. Now I'm ready to go do more. Right, but you gave yourself the moment, the pause to experience it. That on this view is what happiness is about. Stocking your life with material and spiritual values, and that's your purpose. I'm going to have to fast forward through the work of being human, because I think that's what really underlies work as people classically understand it, pursuing a job. The work of being human is the most fundamental thing, and it's actually what ergonomics is. This is, if you look at images of ergonomics, it's all about posture and sitting in a well-designed chair. Ergonomics is from the Greek words ergon and nomos, which means work and law. It's the laws or principles of work, or what works. But on this view, Rand's view, what works for what? Living your life. I'm not going to do the brief detour through Aristotle's Ethics, but I think he was the first systematic ergonomic creator, because ergon means work, and human activity is pursuing energeia, being at work, which is a lifelong thing, and Rand has the equivalent in her ethical theory. We've seen this already, the connection between work and value creation. Value creation makes life worth living. This is what Rand states in the goal of her writing. Sorry, I'm taking you through this very quickly as a wrap-up. So we see work creates value creation makes life worth living. And there are two sides to it. The achievement of creating value to stock your life with, and the experience of reflecting on the values you've created to get the deep joy and satisfaction. And that is the last place she has a glimmer. It doesn't say meaning of life, but it makes your life worth living. You've become the kind of person who creates this kind of life. You've reshaped the world and yourself in the image of your values. That's why the meaning of life is your work. And so the takeaways here are, oops, nope, that's not the takeaway. Sorry. Meaning has objective constraints and involves choice. That was some fascinating discussion. Meaning is achieved and experienced. And the payoff is the meaning of life is the purposive work of being human as you. You. And as a quotation from Rourke is, he just wants to do his work his way. So please step aside and let me get on to the meaning of my life. Thank you.